I'm going to let Jason now share with you some of his insight as to where we go, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Awesome. Thank you very much for having me here. I really appreciate this. This is a great opportunity. This is the first time I've actually laid out our wares, if you will. Very few people have had a chance to actually walk into a medical marijuana center, and I think that that's unfortunate. And if you haven't done that, I encourage you to go to your center that's in your neighborhood and ask if you can have a tour. They're allowed to give you a badge so you can walk through and have a tour of their garden, of their facility itself. It's not as scary as a lot of people think. So thank you for the intro. My background is all over the place. My educational background is in architecture and urban planning and environmental design at City College in New York, as well as at CU Boulder here in Colorado. And from there, I've gotten into a lot of scientific visualization. I've worked on the 9/11 insurance litigation project indirectly for Larry Silverstein. It was with a private company down in the Tech Center here in Colorado. I've also worked at the Rocky Flats closure project. I've worked at on 3 different litigation projects related to Rocky Flats, 2 fires, as well as the litigation between the government and the workers there a few years ago. In addition, I've done some projects for NRail on cellulosic ethanol processes. The list goes on, airplane crashes and so on and so forth. I taught at Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design and taught programming, special effects, character animation for those kids who wanted to get into Hollywood. So I just took my science stuff and made fun. Fortunately, 2 of my students have gone on to win an Oscar for Curious Case of Benjamin Button, for example. Since then, I've done a lot of other things. There was a trigger that actually caused me to start to work in the medical marijuana, social cannabis use, and hemp fields. The hemp background goes way back 20 years into architecture. Of course, we know a little bit about what that can do, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But while I was teaching, and as you can see, I roll around often, I used to ski, I used to be a mountain climber, I used to kayak, I used to do everything that we do in Colorado. Unfortunately, my 10th year volunteering for the disabled program up at Eldora, I was hit by a snowboarder and fractured 3 vertebrae in my back, and I have a tear in my spinal cord. So I can walk a bit, but it's extremely difficult and painful. I became a medical marijuana patient, technically, in 2005 with actually a red card. But before that, I've been a patient since essentially the law was enacted, and I'll speak to that specifically in a second. But we used to go to a church in Denver that allowed us to buy and sell our medical marijuana. And people like Jessica from Twirling Hippie, who used to sell her products various places, came there and would give those to patients. And so I'm very thankful for a lot of people who have been in this industry for a very long time. They've kept us alive, literally. I've gotten off of all of my pharmaceuticals. I used to be on Oxycontin, Tramadol, Neurontin. And if you know what those do to your mind, let alone your body, you'll know why I started to use medical marijuana. That's not to say I wasn't a recreational user, but I used a different amount, and I used it differently. I have a very, very high level of respect for this plant. So in 2008, I was raided by Boulder Drug Task Force. And that experience, sorry, you can see, has affected me. I'm not going to talk about the details because it's very difficult. Aside from the raid, losing custody of my son, losing my job, the same day I was acquitted, which is kind of funny, losing my house, and the list goes on. I would have to say that law enforcement made me who I am today. I'm very, very appreciative. And so, here we are. I've started publishing Cannabis Health News about a month after I won my case because I knew what I knew needed to get out there. Aside from my legal knowledge, information in this book that has not gotten out there still needs to get out there. Cannabis tells cancer to kill itself. It's called apoptosis. It helps MS, it helps Alzheimer's, it helps Parkinson's, it helps pain, it helps so many things. The list, I can name 108 things easily. But we only have 8 approved. So this falls into social use, which is kind of interesting because now people who have PTSD, for example, have access to medical marijuana, or marijuana itself. and can see what it can do for them, and we know the science can back that up. So let's jump into all of this. Thank you for having me here. And I'll talk about the hemp thing too. So cannabis. Cannabis is basically the genus of the species Cannabis sativa. And then there's also a indica and ruderalis strain. And so you can see on the left there are pictures of the sativa, very tall, indica, bushy, and ruderalis, it comes from Russia. It's a feral strain. I don't use that in technical term. It's not appropriate, actually. And then we also call it hemp and marijuana and all these other things. And I noticed as I talk to people in the international arena, we all use different vocabulary, as we do in the media and our own use of it. So we obviously are acknowledging that this has had a history in the medical realm. Before 1937, it was one of the top 3 medicines in our country. It helped with colic, it helped farm animals, it helped kids, it helped adults with various ailments. There's a history of social use, reefer songs, right? So we've got Louis Armstrong, we've got Art Blakely. Of course, there's reefer madness. Took place in 1938. And that scared everybody away from marijuana. It said it was a crazy drug, an evil drug. It said that black people would rape white people and you would kill people and so on and so forth. Created a lot of paranoia. Media is very powerful, especially back then, when that source of media came from very few people, such as Randolph Hearst. We have a history of social use in our country. Obviously Further, or Grateful Dead, the Beatles, and nowadays, of course, we're all familiar with Willie Nelson. His 80th birthday is coming up in April. Now, the interesting thing in terms of the legal side, and this is a little cartoon I think just exemplifies exactly what we're dealing with here. But pot has been demonized, I think, for a bigger purpose. The science and research shows that we have endocannabinoid receptors all over our body. There have been people like Robert Randall, the first medical marijuana patient at the federal level, who demonstrated that marijuana helped his glaucoma. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2001. Talked about my case. And honestly, that was about my decision, my freedom, or I'm going to die. Because I was forced to take those pharmaceuticals. Excuse me, this is really sort of personal here. But if I was forced to take those pharmaceuticals, I wouldn't be here today, I don't think, for various reasons. The community support out there is phenomenal. We have Chaz, for example. At the time, he was 16. His diaphragmatic flutter, I think that's the proper term. It's like nuclear hiccups. He can't breathe sometimes. It's fortunate he's alive today because before he found marijuana, he was having 20, 30 attacks a day. Now he has 1 or 2 a week. Yes, he's under 18 and he uses marijuana and he goes to school. Today we have all these available plant medicines, and this is just an example of one. I have many on the table here. We have capsules and caplets, gel caps, food, not all appealing to kids. This is walnuts dipped in vinegar, cashews in vinegar. I don't think my son would like that. We do have brownies and muffins and all the other things, but if we take this a little further, and I think I lost it amongst all these wonderful things here. We have devices like this one. It's a vaporizer. Looks like a pen. You've probably seen these advertised for quitting smoking or smoking so you don't have to actually smoke a cigarette. E-pens, I guess. E-cigs, I guess they're called. This is a great device because now people like myself can use our medicine in places that we normally couldn't use before and not offend anybody. There's no secondhand smoke. That said, there are some interesting research papers that show that the secondhand smoke and the smoking issue is very different than tobacco. There's evidence historically as well as recent research that shows that asthmatics may benefit from smoking medical cannabis because you can get the medicine right away. Social use. Amendment 64 brings up a lot of interesting issues. I thought that was kind of a funny picture of a woman dancing through the field. Obviously, Photoshop was involved. Civil rights. This is how I feel. And I think we just went through this. First, they ignored us. Then they ridicule you. And they fight you. And we win. And we've won. Excuse me. This is really, really amazing to me. Sorry to get a little personal here, but to take that further, we still have a lot of work to do. And Martin Luther King is a big influence. There are just laws and there are unjust laws, and we know where this goes. And it's our duty to address those unjust laws. And that's how I've felt since I won my court case. I don't take no for an answer very much, and I don't ask for authority. And I'll ask for permission from authority. And so I'll talk about that specifically and related to the hemp bill a little bit. I didn't think I was going to get this emotional. Wow. We need the activists. And we need the advocates. Retired CIA agent Jimmy Carter, Belita, who's an ex-DEA spokesperson, all support legalization of marijuana across the board. Belita actually works with us now on the hemp project, and I'll talk about her too. Data, I love data. Data is where I really come from. My scientific background and visualization background was really taking a 500-page book and turning it into 5 minutes of animation. I love it, my specialty. So I only brought a few little points here, but legalization is associated to 8 to 11% decrease in traffic fatalities. If you look at, there's one insurance company out there, auto insurance company, that actually has acknowledged this data, and they say we're actually safer drivers. It's not a significant number change, but we're actually are safer drivers than your average driver. The rate of fatal crashes has gone down, and in the state, we've seen a 9% decrease in alcohol consumption, I might get these numbers mixed up, and a 5% decrease in DUIs since we've implemented medical marijuana regulatory system. We also, as Craig brought up earlier, see a decrease in teen use. And to speak specifically to the areas, yes, that data is out there, and I'll get that to you. I used to live in Aurora, by the way, and we didn't have any medical marijuana centers. Unfortunately, yes, what would happen is people would go to the other municipalities that have centers and buy their 2-ounce limit, go away, have somebody else go back in, buy another 2 ounces, and that was very common, is very common. And they go sell it in the places like Aurora. And so yes, crime does go up. The price difference does affect the criminal market. Aurora is a very interesting place. I kind of lived there for an experiment. How can this help the jobs and economy and community? I think they all are tied together. Craig, you've touched on quite a few things. Whoops. Drug testing is going to be an issue for businesses, insurance, safety. I know this talk was presented with the chainsaw-wielding stoner, if you will. Honestly, I think that we see these people today. I don't think we're going to see much of a change. Cannabis is an interesting plant. People who use it know when they are impaired and they choose not to do things. They sit on their couch. They're couch potatoes, as we hear. But people like myself who use a lot of cannabis, and I smoke it, I eat it, I use the oils, I use topicals. There's some lotions here, which is a great one to use for arthritis, and the data that we're looking at actually doesn't indicate THC and enters your bloodstream, so that'll be an interesting one. But we are seeing a lot of ancillary jobs come out of this, as Craig has pointed out, and we're going to see a lot more, and this starts to get into the hemp thing in a moment. The politics and law of all of this have been very interesting. That's Mason Tvert in the upper left-hand corner, who's been a big person involved in Amendment 64 and the campaign to regulate marijuana like alcohol. He called me the other day. He's like, you know, I thought once we passed Amendment 64 that I'd have less to do. He's so busy right now because he's referring people and businesses and so on and so forth, networking with all the potential that's going on in this industry. We have Dr. Robert Melamede, who I'd like to point out on the lower left. He's the right person all the way on the right. He is one of the biggest researchers in the cannabinoid research realm, and he actually teaches at Colorado Springs University of Colorado. He's second only to Dr. Meshulam in Israel, who works at the pharmacology school in Jerusalem, if I recall. Oh, I missed this one. On the right side, you'll see Senator Williams, Linda Parker, Mike Bowman, who some of you may have read about just recently, and Brian Vicente also head of the A64 campaign itself. And this was, I'm actually part of that talk as well. I'm just taking a picture. And that was actually a talk for the Colorado Bar Association. And that was actually addressing hemp. Now this is just a perspective I'd like to throw out there because I think we need to look beyond our boundary. This was kind of interesting, but the Dutch police complain that it's their right to smoke cannabis off duty. I almost broke up laughing in this one. And this really reinforces why we need to look at the science. It's a critical issue. And I think the DUID question that's coming up from Senator King that he's bringing back again is going to be answered this session. Dr. Robert Melamede and I are working on addressing that specifically. Actually, the research that he brought up is exactly the same research we're using to counter the argument. Now, one thing I'd like to ask in looking at that perspective is what we're looking at is impairment. And so if somebody is impaired at the 0.08 level of blood alcohol content, then why don't we ask the same question? Demonstrate to me where that impairment is equivalent with cannabis. In other words, show me that 6 to 8-fold impairment number when I use too much cannabis. And I may be different than any of you just because I'm used to it. A new user may behave differently. This is the big one. Last night I was at Club 710 in Colorado Springs. I've been to a couple of the other ones that have opened up recently. Club 64, I keep wanting to call it Studio 54. Sorry. But this is an interesting question. We have the news coming next week as well, and I'm contemplating how to address this if I'm going to even talk about this one. But we had 168 people in this event yesterday, and it was at capacity. Everybody was very social. The security guy was walking around texting. He was so bored, he didn't know what to do. Right? And a bar with 4 people on a Sunday night, there would have probably been a fight. We had 168 people in that bar spending a couple dollars each. They wouldn't spend as much as an alcoholic would, but on a Sunday. But overall, they made a lot more money than they would have. And they had a peaceful crowd that was quiet, didn't spill stuff, whatever, okay? My question was, because DUID comes up all the time, what happens when they all leave the parking lot? It was snowing last night, slippery, right? What's gonna happen? There were no accidents. Exactly what I know, and I assumed would happen, because I've been to many of these events, and I myself, again, am a medical marijuana user. And so we need to address these issues specifically with science and through demonstrative testing, balance testing, response testing, reaction times. Brings up a big issue. We already see, a lot of people using cannabis in Colorado while recreating, while driving, while hiking, while kayaking, while skiing, while riding their bikes. Why do I know this? Because I was one of them. I know a lot of people like that. You might disagree with that. That's okay. I accept that. But I ask you to please open your mind to some education and think about my perspective and ask us questions and what we go through. We also look at art and music. So there's a lot of other industries that come into this. This is a giant pipe. I thought it was really stupid when I saw it, but it's kind of neat now that I look at it. The piece on the left is from an old High Times. It's a friend of mine who painted that years ago. It's one of those drawings that if you start to look at it long enough, you'll see stuff in there. It's a flying Buddha. There's an angel up there. We have future uses. So this question came up in the A64 task force meeting the other day. What about animals? What about children? Odd thing is that there's a company working on a patch for dogs, cannabis patch for dogs. Dogs suffer from hip dysplasia. It's the biggest problem with the inbreeding, I'll call it, with dogs. I have a dog who's in the car resting, as some of you saw earlier, who's very hyperactive, and hopefully she doesn't need to use cannabis. So looking forward, is that real? Are we really going to go in this direction where we're going to have cannabis shops? Are we going to see Starbucks?
Too expensive.
Yeah, good answer. Terrible coffee, it's all burned. So this comes back to the growers. We really need to encourage those caregivers, those people out there that actually care about their plants that Craig brought up earlier. Thank you for bringing that up. You know, it's funny, I really was irritated by the sound of an attorney years ago, and now a lot of them as people. You are friends and coworkers, and I appreciate that, and there are a couple of you here. So thanks for having the opportunity here. I really appreciate that. So let's talk about the other side of things, cannabis, hemp. Today in the front page of the Denver Post, I don't know if you saw this, but hard-working hemp poised for hot growth, backers say. It's a 1913 $10 bill with an agricultural scene of hemp. A lot of what you see on this table is just the beginning. Hemp fabric, hemp hat, hemp seed, protein, high omega-3, 6s, and 9s. In fact, fish oil, as we know, has heavy metals in it. It's actually not healthy. I'm not going to say that out loud, but it's not really good for you because of other issues. There's also no manganese in magnesium. I always get those mixed up. I think it's manganese. They're both in here. And that's the trigger to allow you to absorb GLAs, the essential fatty acids. And so that's absent. And so what's interesting is that this product actually has the same ratio of omega-3s and 6s and 9s as of what our body needs. Flax, for example, is 1 to 25. It's way out there. This is about 1 to 3. There's a guy actually doing a film. So how many of you saw Super Size Me? Right? Eating all the junk food. There's a guy now eating hemp seed every day for the next 365 days, and he's documenting it. So who knows what he's going to look like? I have a feeling he's going to be pretty healthy. So what else do we see on this table? I'll address it specifically later if you have any questions. There's edibles. I do want to point out, we are people that don't take no for an answer. We don't back down. So for example, Lisa Kappelman is another dispensary owner who won a case in Colorado Springs, and I sat with her for the last year and a half, and I'm so happy that she's still here, but she beat a case down there. We won about 7 this summer, 0 losses. So hemp. I like the hemp references. Trying to get high on industrial grade hemp would be like trying to get drunk off of vinegar. You could also smoke a telephone pole, you might get a little buzz.
Who said that?
That one was, I think that was Dave West, if that said that quote. I think that's Dave. I'll have to look back at my notes. There are environmental issues, big ones. So I show a sparrow. I hope I remember my birds. And there was a great article last year, 2 years ago, about how sparrows fly higher, no pun intended, because they eat swallows, excuse me. I always get those mixed up. Fly higher because they have access to hemp seed. Hemp seed is why the bird food industry is still alive today. They were one of the biggest legal arguments that was presented early on in terms of allowing hemp seed into our country, because birds won't eat their bird seed and won't sing and won't fly as high and as far if they don't have hemp seed. And so we see feral hemp in Nebraska and Kansas, for example. I'm a hunter. I love hunting pheasant. She actually hunts with me as well. And we find that there are more pheasant out in Nebraska because they allow all that to just run wild. We take it away in Colorado. There's less pheasant here. Other big environmental issues, phytoremediation. We passed the phytoremediation industrial hemp bill last year, 1099. Governor Hickenlooper signed this on June 4th. So we've been growing industrial hemp since June 4th of last year. And we have started to demonstrate that we can pull toxins out of the soil, such as toluene, benzene, heavy metals like copper and gold, and other amazing things happen. We can reduce salinity issues from 12 to 8%. I don't know if anyone's a farmer, but that means you can bring cropland back into operation. We can remove, as I mentioned, I worked on some of the Rocky Flats project. We can remove plutonium and cesium-137 and strontium from the soil. By the way, Rocky Flats used to, exist. It's now been torn down. But it was our nuclear facility that produced all the cores for our weaponry that we have in this country. They call them grapefruits. It was a plutonium hollow shell. And this is actually how I got into the whole project. But to keep this short, we have a major problem there. And there's signs of strontium, for example, which means we had a detonation. And that's another separate issue. But we can hopefully address that. It's also federal property, so it's another issue. I've been writing for quite a while. I've written about how hemp can help with the Dust Bowl that's coming, and that's something that's actually being talked about amongst the farmers and the legislative body. I did a presentation with the farmers about, a year and a half ago about hemp, and they were very interested in this. I've been published in the Ag Journal, all various places. Hemp can actually help with forest fire damage, and so Mark Udall and Don Stevens, the mayor of Salida, are very interested in this, and then it also relates to water. This is our project. This is how we started. Those are hemp plants. We didn't know it was going to happen, so we started at home. We didn't have a lab at the time. This was very rudimentary. We need to think about the farmers as we move forward, and we've been engaging with them on all levels. We've created language to address the industrial hemp regulatory system in Colorado. We've submitted for bill title, and we are working to get sponsorship. We actually have legislative people on both sides of the aisle, as well as both levels in House and Senate, lining up to sponsor the bill. It looks like we're going to have co-prime in each seat, so 2 instead of 1 in each position, which is absolutely amazing. We've gotten support from Greg Brophy, who is one of the biggest senator farmers, if you will, in the country in this area, and I didn't think we were going to get his support, but we had a great meeting with him the other day, and so far so good. We've met with the industry. I've been up in Canada. I've had the opportunity to present in front of the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance and the Alberta government. And we honestly look at hemp in this country as a burlap sack. When I got up there, I saw things that blew my mind. I saw car parts, I saw motorcycle parts and tractor parts and airplane wings. Hempcrete we know about, but hemp block, that BMW or Mercedes, in the lower left there, uses over 40 parts made from hemp currently. Kestrel, Lotus, Mercedes, BMW, Ford, the list goes on. And if we grow in this country, they have started to indicate that they would purchase from the local source, if you will, and start to make car parts here out of hemp. So these are all European parts. You'll see paper plates that can be biodegraded. You can make pallets, ship something somewhere, throw the pallet in a field, let it biodegrade. Hemp Shield in the lower right, they just signed a contract with, or I should say the National Parks Department signed a contract with them. Every bench, every wooden product and structure in the National Parks Department will be covered with hemp varnish. Oh, that chart in the middle. Hemp versus cotton. Hemp outperforms cotton in so many ways. It dries faster, it absorbs more, it breathes, it insulates better, it protects you from infrared rays, from the sun and UVB and UVA. It's antimicrobial, so if you take a piece of hemp and a piece of cotton, 2 pieces of hemp, 2 pieces of cotton, and you infect each set, the first one, say, with staph infection, the other with MRSA or pneumonia, and you wash them the first time, that hemp is clean. You wash them and wash the cotton over and over and over again. By the 12th wash, there's still signs of contamination. So think about medical apparel, right? A cast, as you see here, for your arm. So antimicrobial, what does that mean? Well, if I build my house out of that, out of hempcrete or hemp insulation, right now insulation compacts. You end up with a space over time. Fill that core with hempcrete. Not only is it a good insulator, it breathes, it can regulate your temperature and humidity levels, but you will not have a problem with black mold. It will eliminate that problem in this country, which is a big problem. Above the center picture, you're going to see a little molecule. It's a CBH1 molecule. That's actually part of the cellulase ethanol project from NREL. And that actually relates directly to hemp because we have multiple fuel sources. We have the oil. Honestly, that's valuable as a food and as a technical oil because it goes for $16 a gallon. I'm not going to put that in my diesel engine. But I can take the herds, I can take the fiber, and we can create methanol. We can create pellets for gasifiers, and create energy for cars and generators. So there's a picture of some pellets. I call this new sun. Something that you can use today's sun, grow today, and use today, instead of digging in the ground for old sun, for that petroleum. Actually, it's from Buckminster Fuller. I'm sure you guys are familiar with him. Henry Ford on the left, he's sitting in his field because he's probably bummed out that he wasn't able to continue building his car in 1941. For some reason, he stopped that process. But in 1941, he had a hemp composite car. There's a video of him online with an axe. He's hitting the back of the car over and over and over again, just like washing that hemp. Not a dent, not a scratch in that car. It's amazing to see this material behave. Rudolf Diesel designed the diesel engine to run on vegetable oil, hemp oil. Unfortunately, for some reason, right after buying a bunch of oranges, they say he killed himself. I don't know why I'd buy oranges before I committed suicide, but I think it's something else. Foods. That's Sean Crew holding a big bag of hemp seed we have here. From Hemp Oil Canada, we know about hemp milk. You can get this stuff in the supermarket. It's kind of funny because you don't see it in King Soopers until you go over to the pharmaceutical section. It's kind of hiding all the way down there somewhere. So we need to really work on education. There's a lot of issues here, misunderstandings. Hemp hearts. It's the inside of the hemp seed itself. So you have a hemp seed, the shell. You have what's called a testa skin, just like in peanuts, you have that little thin shell thing. And then you have the hemp heart, which is where all the nutrition is. Now you can buy these roasted and eat the whole thing, and it's actually very yummy because there's a lot of fiber. It's good for you. Oh, ice cream. That's not really ice cream, it's hemp ice cream. It's a non-dairy treat. I hate using that word because it actually tastes really good. Usually non-dairy treats are kind of funky. So here's where I really get interested. This is the science. Hemp is demonstrating so far that it has a higher tensile strength than Kevlar. Okay, we can make bulletproof vests, body armor out of this stuff. And I wish Mike was here because I wanted to share this with him. I'm worried about our safety. I'm worried about our officers and soldiers as well. This stuff takes Kevlar not only the next step in terms of ballistic resistance, but I don't know if you know this, but Kevlar is very, very susceptible to sharp objects. You can penetrate Kevlar very easily with sharp objects. Hemp, you can't. It actually captures that blade, if you will. So you get an extra feature. Lighter, breathes, and when they sweat, when they're under stress, it performs better when it gets wet. Aerospace industry. This is a fun one. Biocomposites. So we know this material can be used such as fiberglass, but it won't shatter. It's also lighter. It's about 30% lighter than a lot of materials and 30% stronger. We could actually exceed those numbers as we do more research. Research is a big one. So I show these two pictures because we could build that rocket out of hemp materials in the future. And especially if we have disposable boosters. Think about that. What are we throwing in the ocean right now? If we throw a biodegradable hemp booster into the ocean, it's going to biodegrade. Holy crap. This is a cereal that's available, has hemp seed in it, which is talking about the nutritional value. And on the right side, you're going to see the International Space Station. This is on the International Space Station. Why is hemp seed on the International Space Station? I love talking to kids about this because it's science, right? You start getting into fun stuff, the reality of all of this. You get them excited. And yes, it's about the children. This is cashew hide. Kashi had a brain tumor, and he was using cannabis because his dad insisted, based on the investigative research that he had done and reaching out to people like myself. He gave his son cannabis oil. It's known as Phoenix Tears oil. It's basically concentrated cannabis. And I have an empty syringe here, an oral syringe. Doesn't have a hypodermic needle on it. But usually you'll see these with oil in it, dark tar. This is what is demonstrating that we can kill cancers and we can kill tumors. His tumor shrunk by 80% because of what his father did. Now this is very questionable, obviously, but he went into the hospital and he put this right into the feeding tube. This is all over the news, you can look this up. Kashi Hyde unfortunately passed away because of an infection a few weeks ago. Not from that. Cannabis is antimicrobial. So, I have a 12-year-old son, and I'll talk about that specifically, but it's kind of odd that this plant is winning. And I do look at this plant as teaching us. I'm doing what it's telling me to do, and I don't want to get all weird on that. But something's happening. So how do we look forward from here? New inventions, new delivery systems. I've been there. Stoner, Colorado is actually an interesting conversation. Do you know about Stoner, Colorado, anybody? So there's a gentleman who purchased the land, and he's trying to incorporate and basically become his own home rule area. This is just north of Telluride, if I remember right. No, sorry, south, near Durango. I talked to Sheriff Masters about this the other day, who's the San Miguel sheriff, and he's actually very supportive of all this. It's very interesting to see. I work with the Colorado State Police on the hemp side of things. They're very supportive as well. We're educating them on how to identify plants. The regulatory system itself is going to consist of identifying where things are located, for example. So looking forward, we're looking at regulatory systems, we're looking at licensing, but there's a really cloudy thing going on. A lot of people don't know what to do about the feds. They don't know if they're going to come in and cut our crops down and whatever. There's been some interesting indication that they're going to put this on the low priority list, but when I look at this from the hemp side of things, what I see is that there have been 27 states that have tried hemp legislation, and they've all put DEA requests to grow hemp. We approached it differently in the state of Colorado. We didn't ask permission. We don't see that we need to ask permission because it's a states' rights issue. Diane DeGette is actually bringing a bill through session, the House right now, that hopefully will basically affirm those states' rights issues. I can't remember exactly what the bill title is. I don't know if anyone's seen that yet. And it specifically addresses the states' rights of medical marijuana and marijuana legislation in Colorado and Washington and some other states. So I've been working at various levels. Our team consists of about 10 people. James is one of them, for hemp cleans. And we've been speaking with the USDA. We've been working with the Farmers Bureau, with the Farmers Union at the state and federal level. The communication's there. I did that presentation, like I mentioned earlier, at the Colorado Bar Association, and that triggered a lot of excitement. I got an email from an attorney this morning who was so happy that we did that because he said he'd never seen so much excitement behind a new industry. We are creating a new industry. This is not replacing anything. This is supplemental. It's a bio-relationship that we're creating on the hemp side of things. So for example, we want to help cotton. Cotton's a bad word, right? Corn, we want to help corn. We have the issue of GMOs and Monsanto. All these big things actually get addressed with hemp in terms of the conversation. So for example, if we bicrop corn and hemp, if we plant hemp between the rows of corn, that corn crop's going to increase by about 10% that following year. We're going to improve the soil quality. We're going to retain moisture in the soil because hemp has a high, what they call RUE factor, radiation utilization efficiency factor. So it's a thermal sink, so it can decrease temperature in the atmosphere. And so it holds or retains a lot of that moisture in that local bioclimate or local microclimate, excuse me. And so we could see the benefit to cotton, reduction in pesticides and herbicides. Cotton, if you didn't know this, is the biggest consumer of herbicides, pesticides, and nutrients. It's awful. And then they rotate that with peanuts. And so peanuts absorb all that stuff and then we eat that stuff. So we have a lot of issues that we need to address here. And we can look at this from an environmental perspective, from a healthy aspect. I'm wearing hemp right now. My hat's hemp, my vest is hemp. I believe that if we start to live a hempy life, very hempy life, you wake up, you get out of bed in your hemp sheets, and you put your hemp slippers on, you have your hemp robe, and you go to your bathroom and you wash your hands with your hemp soap, right? Dr. Bronner's soap, your hemp shampoo, your hemp toothpaste, your hemp toothbrush. What's going to happen is, in time, we are all going to get healthier and happier. We're going to have less issues across the board. Hemp socks, for example, antimicrobial, right? Think about that for a second. All those guys out there, I'm sure women have the same issue, the gym issue, right? So if you wear those socks, forget about all those creams. So that's my son and me. He's 12. How do we talk to the kids? Because this is a big issue. I have this stuff sitting around. Is he going to eat it? He's 12 years old. He'll be 13 tomorrow. So obviously we know what that means, right? He's curious. Honestly, I've been very open about this for many years with him. And he knows that this is all medicine. He knows to ask before he picks something up to eat it. And not just at my house, but other people's houses. It's just like a gun. I use firearms. And my concern is he's going to pick up a firearm one day and think it's a toy. Because a toy's trigger is a lot harder to pull than a real gun. And so, in my mind, education is key. If we teach them what this really is, and we treat it for what it really represents, and we package it, and we put it in places that are away from people or kids that can't make those decisions, or may be susceptible to taking that. These are questions that we have to answer. Obviously, a lot of us have tried cannabis as we were kids. I'm not going to tell them no. It's going to do it anyway. And so I feel that we need to make this an open conversation. We need to look at how do the kids see us? They're smart. I know when I try and hide something, he's going to find it. He's going to look for it, right? It's the forbidden fruit kind of behavior. What we have seen is that if we address this, she's having a good time, is if we address this responsibly as adults, the kids are going to see it, and they're going to respect us. So this comes back to, I wish Mike was here, because I really wanted to thank him for what he's doing. But we need to create that relationship with law enforcement, with our communities, with our churches. I've spoken at various Baptist churches, and they actually were very receptive. And so I encourage all of you to reach out to your communities, to go visit the medical marijuana dispensary, speak to patients, reach out to people, and I'm glad you're here, Kevin, who are in the patent attorney realm. Come to places like this where we can speak about inventions. We had a meeting on Saturday. It was the hemp gathering. A lot of people thought this was an official meeting. But all it was inviting people who were just interested. And so we had builders, engineers, architects. The owner of the Safeway ice cream manufacturing plant came. We had, I got a contact this morning from a tar manufacturer, asphalt tar manufacturer, because they use soy in manufacturing tar. He wants to know if we can use hemp oil. Think about that. You're going to drive on like a hemp road, right? With your hemp tires and your hemp car. And it might be funny, but this is where all this was going before things changed in 1937. And so we're just honoring what's already been given to us in the beginning. I didn't invent anything. Craig pointed out we don't have to invent the wheel. I'm taking tools that have been given to me, given to all of us. And so I love what I'm doing. I do this because I know that he's going to grow up in a better world, that his kids are going to have an opportunity with their energy, with their food, their education, to benefit and prosper. And there's a choice out there. It's not just solar, it's not just hemp, it's everything. And it's all of us working together to see what this really means. It's not scary. And once the person who's against us has an opportunity to listen or opens their ears to us, most of the time they become our biggest warrior. And I know a lot of them personally, and I'm really thankful to them. And that includes ex-CIA Director James Woolsey under Clinton. It includes Barry McCaffrey, the ex-drug czar. So what's interesting, and I showed Carter, of course, he's been talking about this for 40 years. What's interesting is we've come full circle. And so at this point, we don't know what's going to happen with regulations. The hemp side of things, that's moving very, very quickly and very positively. I ask you to please look at this article as well as the Washington Post in the Health and Sciences section. Keep your eye on Bloomberg News. I did an interview with them the other day. There's some national television coming down the pipeline. Keep your eye on Kentucky. They also are introducing legislation. There's the James Comer, Commissioner of Agriculture, has been pushing this. And their only resistance is law enforcement. And I don't mean to be impolite, but this is something that we need to talk about. And honestly, I don't know how to say it better than this, but I'm not going to take any more of what law enforcement has to say about hemp and marijuana. as truth because they don't know what they're talking about. And yes, there are a lot of people, a lot of law enforcement who are on our side, and they're very supportive, and I know that there are exceptions to the rule, but honestly, if you're not going to come to the table with science and fact, and they're going to come at us with fear and propaganda, I just can't tolerate that anymore. And so I feel obligated to be that person who I've been turned into in the last 3 years by them to say no. Just say no. Sorry. So thank you. You guys have any questions? So it's more of a comment, is just pointing out that marijuana is not just a medicine, but it's also just like alcohol. And you bring up a really good point because that's what Amendment 64 was trying to point out. Yes. So the question is basically related to THC levels in hemp and medical cannabis or recreational social use marijuana. And what happens when you start to plant hemp in a field and then you have the introduction of recreational cannabis? Is that about it? So that's a great question because this is something that the other 30 countries that grow industrial hemp don't worry about. They actually encourage the growth of industrial hemp near cities because it reduces the THC levels. And so my question is, why would you want to grow something that you want to smoke in a hemp field? Number one, it's going to be very obvious that you walk through that field because hemp grows about 4 inches away from each other. So obviously you're going to have a sign, so the farmer's going to know. The other problem is that that's going to seed because of the pollen. And so now you have something that's not what we want, without seeds, or what they call sensimilla, without seeds. And it's then going to be seeded. And so all the energy from the plant just went to seed and not resin production. Now hemp itself is absent mostly of resin. It's about illegal strains in terms of the international market are below 1%. We've defined a 0.3% limit for our state. And then we also are addressing a industrial hemp research category as well, which will be above that. So one of the other issues that we have to address is what's going to happen to medical marijuana. So if we start growing hemp, is everyone going to start getting seeded medical marijuana? Well, no, we just have to put a HEPA filter on their intake system. And we need to report when the pollen cloud is traveling and where, because we can track those things. It's normal agronomy. It's nothing out of the scope of anything else we do. So hopefully that answers your question. So THC level essentially will drop quickly.
If its own devices, will the THC level return, or do you have to constantly bring it down?
Great question. So essentially what we're seeing is that the only reason THC is there is because people have bred that trait into the plant. If you let it go wild or feral, it will automatically lower its level of THC over time. And so just like with hemp, with Kentucky hemp or the Piedmont strain, for example, that we used to have in this country up until 1958, all the ruderalis strain that you see out in the wilds and ditchweed as we know it, that is useless because it's lost its initial bred trait for fiber or for oil. And so to get a little deeper into this, what we're looking at is a matrix of what they call cultivars or strains in the hemp realm. And then we have behaviors or fiber quality in terms of long, thin, high quality fibers to industrial fibers, or technical fibers. So automotive parts is another example. And then we have oil seed, industrial seed oil, seed cake for whether it's animal or human consumption. And so that actually goes even deeper into the matrix. And so what we're looking at there is THC is really not the only thing that we need to understand, and Craig brought this up earlier. We know so little about this plant. There are hundreds of cannabinoids, and we know 6. And so what happens if you start to increase the CBD number, for example, while keeping THC levels the same? I can answer that to you, actually. But we see that it starts to behave differently. And so THC really is a focus because it's all we really know about in terms of the public dialogue, but there are a lot of other constituents we need to worry about. So there's a terpene that's actually psychoactive as well. And those are the only 2 psychoactive components in the plant. So hopefully I gave you a little more information. Anybody else? Yes, in the back of the room.
In how many states are hemp products currently legal?
Hemp products are legal federally.
Okay, so I thought so. So that begs my next question, which is, as far as the opportunity goes for such a broadly reaching plant, what's the holdup? Why is this not already a gigantic burgeoning market?
So the question is, why is this market not growing as fast as it should with all the indicators acknowledging that it is legal under the federal guidelines? There's a lot of stigma that has come from this. And there's still a lot of legal issues that have to be addressed. I've come across some interesting research from 2009 that actually starts to address some of this. But this has been a long-standing argument for about 9 to 12 years. So as I mentioned, the birdseed industry was a big proponent for pushing the issue on this one. NAFTA came into play, and that was argued from Hemp Oil Canada in terms of food, human food consumption. Because what happened was, they shipped, I think it was 7 containers of hemp seed to the border, and they were stopped in customs. And they said, go back. Take your hemp seed and go back home. It's illegal here. Question is if somebody comes to this country with cocaine, do they say go back with your cocaine? No. So that raised a lot of questions. And so then the HIA, the Hemp Industry Association, has been litigating with the DEA about that issue. And that's a vague, cloudy issue. And that's actually something that we're pushing forward as well. This gets into 1961 Drug Convention at the UN, specifically states in Title 28 that industrial hemp and seed are exempted for horticultural and industrial use. And then you start getting into the United States laws, and that starts to become an issue because what the DEA has done is they've created multiple categories. They started with marijuana, then hemp, because they didn't start with hemp. Remember, there was a tax act. You had to buy a tax stamp, and you can grow hemp, but that was expensive. And so then they had the 61 convention, then there was the 1970 drug, I can't remember what that's called, sorry, CSA, the Controlled Substances Act. And that left hemp in an interesting spot because it combined everything. But then since then, they've now created 3 categories. There's hemp, marijuana, and synthetic delta hydrotetracannabinol. So they keep expanding this. And so from the research that I've done from the DEA, sorry this is sort of a long-winded answer, but the research I've done from the court cases and the hearings and the drafts and all these other wonderful documents indicates that they are exposing themselves to litigation. So no one's actually approached this. I'd like to sue the DEA. Anybody want to help? Any questions? Any others?
Well, we've run out of time.
Cool. Thank you, guys. I appreciate this.
Let's give Jason a big round.